This is a plant called mullein, which is very common. Most people know this one. It's very easy to pick out in the landscape. Verbascum thapsus is the scientific name. I'm going to leave my tobacco. Actually, ironically, this one is also called Indian tobacco, which is, it's kind of a nickname for this plant, or a common name. Mullein is used in a lot of smoking blends, and I used to make smoking blends and sell them in Madison when I had Three Trees Herb Shop, and I use the leaves of mullein as a base for all of my blends. The leaves are fuzzy, and they help to keep the blend burning, whether you're using it in a smoking blend or a smudge blend, which would be burning herbs for incense or for spirit healing. The leaves kind of act as somewhat like a tinder to keep the other herbs burning. So it's very commonly used that way. Today I'm going to gather the flowers, which I use as, these are calming and sedating, and they're also anti-inflammatory. So I'm going to make an oil out of them to use. We use it against ear infections. You can use it as like a chest and neck rub for a spasmodic cough. So I brought a sturdy mason jar, and I'm going to pick the flowers that look like they're in their prime. And again, it's a nice dry day, which is perfect for making infused oils. When you're making an oil, the plant has to be very dry. The jar needs to be very dry. Everything that the plants or the oil comes in contact with needs to be dry. Otherwise, you risk the chance of growing mold. I heard a story from Susan Weed about a woman that would send her children out to pick the mullein flowers, and then she would make a wine out of these. And so she would send them out to pick them on the sunny days in the summer, and then during the rainy days of fall or the days of winter where everyone was inside, she gave everyone a little bit of the mullein wine, which was sedating. So it would keep the kids from driving each other and herself crazy. So.
Imagine the alcohol didn't hurt at all.
Right, that too. And again with the mullein, the bees often will be on these, and you can tell which ones are the strongest ones by watching the bees go to them. I think you'll see, if you're shopping for herbal medicines and you're looking in particular for children's medicines, you'll see the mullein flower as a very common component in the ear oil because of the anti-inflammatory action. It's a specific against otitis media or infection or inflammation in the ear. When my kids were very small, I used to get the mullein flowers like I'm doing today and then combine them with garlic or usnea or echinacea or a combination thereof, and use that against the ear infections, and that worked very well for us. We never had to use antibiotics for any of our ear infections. The mullein leaves I harvest pretty much any time throughout the year. As you can see, they're large and you don't need many, but the leaves we use in a tea, infusion, and some of these are just opening, and I can use these too. The leaves we use in an infusion, which is a strong tea made by using a large handful of dried herb per 1 quart of boiling water, and we leave that to steep overnight. Traditionally, In Europe, the Mullein medicinal brew is made with the infusion, like I mentioned, and then you mix that in a 1-to-1 ratio with milk. And then that's a very good medicine for chest colds of any kind, bronchitis. And the kids really like it. They can add honey, and my kids really like tea with milk, so that's an easy one to get them to drink, is the Mullein infusion with milk and honey. And I know there's some people who are anti-milk out there, but
As long as it's organic, right?
yeah, I think organic dairy, it's good to support organic dairy farms, and since southwestern Wisconsin is the mecca of organic dairy, I would feel like a fool if I didn't use it, because milk is a good medicine. So this will be an external remedy. And I've gathered the mullein flowers. I'm going to take an olive oil and top this off. Again, the folk method is fill the jar with flowers or plant material, and then fill the jar with your solvent, which is in this case going to be the oil. You want to leave a little room on top, but not too much, because you don't want it to oxidize.
What do you mean by a little room on top?
Like when you're canning,
Oh,
you
don't
leave
fill
a little
it.
margin on the top.
Don't fill it
You
all the
want
way to the top.
right, don't fill it all the way. You want to have what David Hoffman calls the slosh factor. So you can go like that. That's a technical term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to know those.
And again, the labeling, so mullein flowers, plant part, olive oil, and the date. And this, like the tinctures, is going to steep, the herbs will steep in the oil for 4 weeks at room temperature, and then I'll strain them out. Olive oil, unlike the seed oils, is a fruit oil. So it has a very long shelf life, and it's also very nutritive to the skin. That's why I like to use that one for my external remedies.
This is the mighty mullein, Verbascum thapsus, native to Europe but scattered everywhere. I've seen it in Death Valley, seen it pretty close to the Arctic Circle. So it's very hardy. It's biennial, so this is in its second year. In its first year, it'd just be a basal rosette of leaves on the ground. The leaves are very furry, with a little fiber sticking out. They remind you of the hair of the lungs, which is what it's for. The leaves are big too. They can get bigger than this by far. So big leaves always are indicator for the lungs. Looks like tobacco, another lung plant. And we traditionally use the leaves of the first year, although people have introduced the root and various usages, and the flowers are used in oil for the ears, for removing wax out of the ears. And however, it's most famous as a lung remedy for like dried out lungs, where the hairs of the lungs have been kind of strained, coughed down by a lot of activity, and where you have just kind of a worn out, coughing, a harsh cough has kind of worn the lungs down. Also, it's for a harsh, racking cough. Like, it's so harsh that after a couple months of that, you could break a rib. And in fact, it's for broken ribs and broken bones. First, though, we use it mostly for the lungs that way. Dry, irritable cough, relapsing subacute bronchitis, relapsing during the wintertime. Then if you give it, it will lubricate. It releases the fluids from the synovial membranes around the joints through the pores, which go then along the bones, tendons, muscles, ligaments, and lubricates the musculoskeletal system. I learned this because we put some on the hoof of a horse, knocked the manure off, put it on the hoof of the horse, and boom, all this fluid came out from around the coffin bone, which is the central bone in the bottom of the hoof. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? What is that substance? And I asked around, and it turns out it's synovial fluid. It doesn't really have a name, except it's synovial fluid that comes out of the synovial membranes into the muscular and skeletal system where it lubricates, again, along there. And it's very important understanding for the musculoskeletal system. But at any rate, it helps set bones because it lubricates. It's very good for complex fractures in the hands and feet where the bones are all kind of small little bones that are interconnected and little bones easy to get out of place. The bones also have release chemicals that help them find their way back to where they were before. So it's very good for that. It's good for the spine. It knows how to grow straight. And one of my friends had a dream about it, that the plant or some being was telling him to pick the leaf from along the stem that corresponded to the area along the spine. So if your spine was hurting low, you picked a low leaf. If it was hurting middle leaf, high leaf, and you put that on your spine. That's directly from the plant, from the other world. Otherwise, he says use the root at the beginning of the second year, or at the end of the first, because the root contains all that straightness. That's excellent for the spine. Releases that synovial fluid for a creaky spine. It's also a bit of a lymphatic remedy. It's in the Scrofularia family, which means it's for scrofula, or that family, some members. Scrofula being swollen glands. And it's for kind of a dried out system. Also, finally, it's one of the few herbs that has a occupational hazard for herb store clerks. In that if you stick your hand in a bottle of it or get the dried herb all over you, it causes irritation in the skin for a day or two. So that's mullein. Fine old herb.
One easy to recognize plant is mullein, Verbascum thapsus. And you can often see mullein when you drive by the roadside because it has these really tall, powerful stalks. Most of the flowers are gone from this plant, but you can see there's still some little yellow flowers. Verbascum comes from the same root word as barbarian, because this plant is so soft and fuzzy, it was related to beards at one time, like a barb or a barbarian. Mullein leaves are a great remedy used for hay fever and allergies, for coughs, for colds. They are anti-inflammatory, antispasmodic, somewhat mucilaginous. If you are going to make a tea of mullein, I would suggest using a very fine strainer because there's a lot of little hairs of the mullein plant that could be somewhat irritating. Mullein sometimes affectionately gets called toilet paper or Girl Scout or Boy Scout toilet paper because if you're in the woods, this is a plant that is soft and absorbent. For many thousands of years, people would often put mullein leaves in their shoes as a way to extend the life of their shoes and cushion their feet and also make their walk a little bit lighter upon the earth. It's also known that mullein has been used as a type of makeup. In many cultures, it's not considered acceptable for women to wear makeup, so perhaps a woman would hear the clatter of horses and go grab a mullein leaf. Quick, he's coming, and use it to rouge her cheeks. Also very valuable of mullein are the mullein flowers, and mullein flowers are made into a wonderful oil. I usually collect mullein flowers and put them in a glass jar with garlic and olive oil and strain it. And if someone in your life has an earache, you take the strained oil and put just a couple drops of the gently warmed oil in the ear, and it'll help fight infection and reduce the pain. And that's really a great remedy for any mother with small children to know. There's a legend that says however tall the mullein gets is how much snow we're going to get this year, so I think it's going to be a snowy winter. This one's taller than me.